response to danger. And we need to learn to mobilize our bodies in response to real danger, not to imagined danger. The third thing that healthy anxiety is there to do for us is to act as a spur or a goose, goosing us into action. I remember, and it's getting to be longer all the time, but I remember being 12, 13 years old. I was in 8th grade, and I got my first, this is back when vinyl records were still, and I was invited to my first dance. And I danced. But I pretty much imagined that there was going to be girls there, so I definitely wanted to go. But I was feeling anxious. What was my anxiety encouraging me to do? Go to dance. That would be the right answer. There's two answers. Well, there's probably more than two answers. Two main answers. Learn to dance. That's the right answer. The other answer is, don't go! And that second one's the problem. Don't go. Because it works. As soon as I don't go, as soon as I avoid it, oh man, I feel better. In the short run. But then the problem is, what happens in the long run if I got such relief from avoiding? It only encourages me to avoid again and again. So our anxiety is there trying to teach us to learn something new. And the fourth thing that healthy anxiety is there to do for us is to act as a signal flag. Helping us to recognize unfinished business. Children, adults for that matter, but children like consistency. They like dependability. They like predictability. But life being what it is, it's rarely predictable. So families go through difficult times. And they're usually going through the same time that their child is. And maybe we forget to talk to our child about how they're doing, going through this. Grandpa dies, people go through divorce, all this kind of stuff. But children, healthy children, are egocentric. Everything's about them. It's just a natural thing that children do. So if nobody talks with them about their feelings over what's going on with this trauma, the message to the child is, well, I guess my feelings don't matter. People who suffer with a lot of anxiety tend to be emotional stuffers. Not intentional, it's just what they've learned. They stuff things. And they stuff them, and they stuff them, and they stuff them, and they stuff them. And then something comes along in life later on. Maybe we're now a teenager or a young adult, and we're going through a breakup of some 2-year relationship in high school, or anything. And all those feelings in the current are, because we've stuffed them before, they get blown way out of proportion because of what was never tackled previously. So the past comes back to haunt us. And part of the question that's important for people to begin to examine is, when have I maybe felt like this before? So that we can kind of finish with things, so that we can be free to move on. So, That is what healthy anxiety is there to do for us. We need a certain amount of healthy anxiety. It leaves us feeling alive, challenged, and virile. But if we avoid too much, we don't have healthy anxiety. We have boredom. How do we know when we're suffering with needless or unnecessary anxiety? Well, that's really pretty simple. Anytime we start having physical symptoms, anytime we aren't sleeping at night, anytime we find ourselves worrying. Worrying is kind of an interesting symptom. I worried all the time. And I worried because I thought, well, first of all, my mom worried, and my grandma worried, so I just figured this was life. This was my lot in life. But I worried because my self-confidence in that specific area wasn't there. And I thought if I worried about it ahead of time, it wouldn't catch me off guard. And not only did I not trust myself to deal with it physically, I particularly didn't trust myself to deal with it emotionally. So I'd worry about it. Anybody here ever, I'm not asking you to raise your hand, but anybody here ever worry about your parents dying? Makes sense, because I'm not quite convinced that I'm going to be able to do it without my parents. I won't be able to. I'd lose their support, for somebody that's close with a parent. Well, I've lost both mine. I'm an orphan. But we need to develop the confidence. I was just convinced if nothing would ever catch me off guard, then I have an illusion of security, illusion of control. It's just an illusion. And sooner or later, if that's our method, worrying about things, something's going to catch us off guard, and we'll think, I didn't worry enough. So what are our choices? We either need to learn to worry better, or we learn self-confidence. What do you think we're going to choose? Well, where do you learn how to have self-confidence? So most of the time we're going to go to the easiest thing, which is to worry more. It just feeds on itself. So worry is strongly related to lack of self-confidence. So all those physical symptoms that I did bring along, too numerable to describe, all the drug and alcohol, self-medication, all of the obsessive thoughts and rituals, the raging. That's one of the typical ways that people who are stressed deal with their feelings is by raging. And raging is significantly different than anger. Yes?
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we will. Anybody here listen to me speak years ago with Chris Manis at the conference, the bar in Rapid? Yeah. Chris said as we were preparing to present together, I can't for the life of me figure out why he called me. Anyway, he looked through the information I was going to be sharing. He said, you really need to spend a lot of time on this topic, Rex, this one on anger, because lawyers don't deal with anger very well. What we learn about anger is win, lose. And that doesn't translate well to marriage, because we need to learn win-win conflict. So yeah, we will spend some time talking about anger. This makes sense? Healthy anxiety versus unnecessary. Any question you had about how do you know the difference between the two? Because they do get kind of confusing sometimes. The third thing that people need to learn about, and this is something we're going to be doing in the breakout session, how do I calm myself down? It's an important skill that all human beings need to learn, but people with anxiety particularly need to learn it because we're not very good at it. We don't know how to calm ourselves down. We actually know how more to rev ourselves up because we've been practicing the skill a lot. There's three things involved in learning to calm ourselves down. The first is breathing properly. What's the first thing we do when we get anxious, stressed? We tighten up. And it makes sense. We need to tighten up to guard ourselves, to protect ourselves. But when we do that, the first thing that we tighten is our gut. And when we tighten our gut, we can't breathe properly. And when we can't breathe properly, we don't oxygenate our system in response to the danger. And if I was to ask a client, and I often do, the very first time we get together, take a deep breath. And they'll do. That is not a deep breath. That is a very shallow breath. But when we have our gut tight, that's the only way we can breathe, up in our chest. Okay. A deep breath involves relaxing those stomach muscles and breathing. If I can do that in front of a group of strangers. Chest, my shoulders aren't moving at all. It's the same kind of breathing that we use in choral or in childbirth, natural childbirth. We need to relax the stomach muscles. So first, we need to breathe properly. Second of all, we need to learn how to relax our entire bodies. Well, that's not something particularly skilled for a person with anxiety. We're very hyper people. We're very ambitious. We're always on. Type A. Somebody said type A last night as we were at dinner. Yeah. Attorneys, dentists, physicians, nurses, teachers, they're all type A types. That's the ones that are led to the profession. And in fact, they've probably gotten messages along the way. I got messages along the way. Don't ever let down. Always be on. Well, there are times in our life where it's important for us to be on. There are times in our life where it's important for us to multitask. But there's also times in life when we need to completely let down, to rejuvenate, to recharge our batteries. And that's the part that we ain't good at. We're always there for everybody. And we don't relax. That's going to lead to burnout. So it's important that we learn to relax our entire bodies. Remember, my wife and I went to Mexico. One of the first times we ever went to Mexico, we'd both been through something rather difficult in our lives, and we just went down there. We left our newborn son for the first time with my mom and dad in LA, and we went down to Mexico for a week. And man, the first 3 days were uncomfortable. And I kept thinking, there's just not enough to do here. And the worst thing a guy could have done was to have gone on a tour or to have done something active. But somehow it occurred to me, just sit, Rex. Just sit. Just maybe do some reading. Just relax. And after about 2 or 3 days, my shoulders came down. And that's something I've had to learn throughout my life, is the first couple days to stay active. We never really fully relax. And the third piece in learning how to soothe ourselves, how to relax, without question the most difficult part is learning how our thinking gets involved. It's incredibly important. That's why we're spending the breakout session talking about this. We're always thinking. And like I said before, most of our thinking is unconscious. So we need to recognize how our thinking creates this mess. Our perfectionism, our being punitive with ourselves, our all that stuff. Questions about that? Yep.
So do you think multitasking actually helps with anxiety or causes anxiety? I don't think there's anyone in
Yeah, there's no
the
one.
profession that like doesn't try to do
Yeah.
more than one thing.
Getting a lot of things done certainly helps us to get some things off our list. But the question that we need to ask ourselves, is it ever enough? You know, if we chronically are texting or if we're chronically doing work, we do need to have times when we're just let down entirely. So it doesn't help, maybe in the short run, but we need to balance that with relaxing entirely. And if we're just not doing that for weeks at a time, we need to be careful. Yes?
It's good to have a hobby.
Yes. There's about balance. What is so nice about a hobby? Because we go into flow. Flow, if you look it up on the internet, Google it. That much I know. I don't know how to Google it, but yeah. Flow is when we get into an activity and we lose track of time. Anybody here have a hobby that, you know, is they're planting flowers or they're doing woodworking or they're biking? You think, "I'm gonna get here. I can't believe what's going on." That's a good thing. Hobbies are tremendous.
Maybe getting into this, or I'm taking it wrong, but those 3 steps to me sound a lot like what you hear people who practice meditation say, or what the new buzzword seems to be in the legal profession is mindfulness.
Exactly right. Learning mindfulness. One of the things that, there's a number of things I hope I say today, but it's a fairly short period of time for me to speak. But one of the things you're reminding me, and that's why I like these questions, is there's one of 3 places that we can have our mind. And when we're feeling excessive anxiety, we're in one of 2 places. We're either out in the future, what-ifing, horribilizing, catastrophizing, or we're back in our history, beating ourselves up and being punitive. So, and I know that if I'm anxious, excessively anxious, I'm in one of those 2 places. So what's missing? The present. Being mindful. Being in this moment. And when we live in this moment, we have absolutely no excessive anxiety. But we may think we're in the moment, our body, our butt's in the moment, but our head's in the future. You know, I was never able to attend to things. But when we listen to a joke and we laugh until our guts hurt, or we watch a smile of a child and we just get lost in that smile, as we are sitting with a friend and get lost in conversation without alcohol, that's living in the moment. Yes, that's what we need.
And maybe you're gonna address this later, but you know, I think it was kind of addressed by another question, but so often we're gonna tell some people some bad news, like you're going to prison and they're not gonna be ma or pa anymore to these kids.
Should,
I mean, it's not a pleasant news, and it's a big part of our job.
yeah. It's one of the reasons that attorneys have a lot of excessive anxiety, is of the responsibility involved. One of the reasons I chose not to do home studies early in my practice is I didn't want that kind of responsibility. And I wasn't confident back when I was 23 years old that I wanted to do that. I don't think that would have been a pleasant place to be. I can do it now because I'm more confident and it doesn't affect me like that. But responsibility, that's normal, healthy anxiety. Like you were talking about before, who is going to tell news to like to somebody that you have been working with, and you know it's going to kick them. So they don't want to have an attorney that doesn't give a shit. But just realize that wasn't my choice. That was their choice. Yes.
You know, I feel like when I have anxiety and I get excited and uptight, that if I can go someplace and contemplate and try to just consider what's going on, and try to deal with what the problem is. A lot of times I think I can change from being so uptight to being more peaceful.
I think what you're alluding to is what I would refer to in the get back to balance stuff. Most of us need, one of the skills that I teach in my program is learning to be more contemplative. Learning to take the time to be thoughtful. One of the skills that I've been doing for 35 years is to journal. Why is journaling, it's not important, it's not something everybody does, but for me it's been very helpful because it helps me. When we're living, we're uncomfortable about something, so we just kind of stick it off to the side, we don't think about it, and then something else comes in and we're uncomfortable about it, we stick that off to the side, we got 10, 15 things that we're stuck off to the side. And journaling for me helps me to slow down and to finish the thought so that I can come up with a strategy to deal with it. That's important. That's part of being mindful. Now, a part of being mindful is being contemplative. A part of being mindful is also to transcend the present and to just go, and we'll do that this afternoon in the deep relaxation, where we're kind of thinking about nothing. We're allowing our minds to be blank. So, yes, both of those are important. That's what we're going to be talking about basically this afternoon. How do we scare and comfort ourselves? Very important. Following that, we'll talk about, I think, the most important thing, the biggest dynamic in creating most of our excessive anxiety. Actually, it's probably the basis, as far as I'm concerned, in any mental health problem, is understanding the impact of shame. Whenever any human being goes into a situation, we all do an unconscious evaluation of that situation and determine, do I have what it takes to deal with this situation? If I believe I do, I've got what it takes. How do I feel? Yeah, confident, relaxed, comfortable. But if I arrive at the conclusion, accurate or otherwise, that I don't have what it takes, or if I'm not sure if I've got what it takes, how do I feel? We either feel anxious, or we feel overwhelmed, depressed, but we sure don't feel pleasant. And what leads to the conclusion that I ain't got what it takes is our shame. Now, shame is something that all human beings have, but most people don't recognize it. They don't understand it. And as I was in therapy for my anxiety, I realized most of the crap in my life that was feeding my anxiety was shame-based. So I did a lot of research, and when I wrote my book, it's Transforming Anxiety, Transcending Shame. Understanding, and that's basically what the book is about, helping us to understand the subtle things in our life, or the not so subtle things in our life, that create shame, and that's the thing that messes with our self-confidence. But as soon as we arrive at the conclusion that I ain't got what it takes, then it doesn't matter whether it's accurate or not, I'm going to feel anxious. So shame is critical. One of the things I'd like to do sometime is to come back and spend an afternoon just talking about shame, because it is evoking